and then we'll turn to you.
There we go.
Hi, this is Charlotte Pearson, the producer of Ready Row USA, and we are at the head of the Charles Regatta 2023. We are broadcasting live. We're kind of working out the kinks in our live stream workflow. As I was telling Peter, this is Peter Kermond, CEO of Burnham Boat. Is that pretty accurate?
Well, you'd say Burnham Boat Slings.
Burnham Boat Slings.
But we call ourselves Burnham.
Burnham, yeah. I think everybody knows.
Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to run through a few people that I need to acknowledge for the helping us set up and make this successful. We've had talked to some amazing people this weekend, and we've got a couple more wonderful surprises in store. ReadyRowUSA.com. You can find all the information about our Head of the Charles coverage here at this website, and much more to come. Arlington Community Media helped us set up the podcasting equipment and came and did troubleshooting all weekend for us. Wonderful community media station with, and you don't have to pay for the equipment.
I'll give a shout out to Arlington. Before I moved north 30 years ago, I used to live in Arlington, and right opposite Cape Rada Bakery.
Oh,
So,
you lucky dog.
yes, indeed.
Oh,
And back in my rowing days, I'd go in there at 5:30 in the morning.
yeah.
They're in baking at 4, and they had a pot of stale coffee on, and they gave me free coffee every day for the whole national team training cycle that I was living there.
And you were on the national team at that time.
Back in the day. Yes, it was.
Did you get them into rowing by any chance?
Not really. Not really. But there's a couple of women that still work there, and I visit them on the Head of the Charles usually, and I pop in.
Oh, yeah.
And so I pop in and see, and there's this one woman, and she goes, "Oh, I knew it was this time of year."
And they were, how long have they been there?
They've been there. Well, I lived there starting in 84.
Yeah.
And they might have opened up in the late 70s or maybe
Okay.
1980, or I don't really remember.
Yeah,
but,
I moved there in 1989, and I think they were
Yeah.
really there. Yeah.
and I was there 84 to 94.
So that's Arlington, Massachusetts, if you're listening from somewhere else in the world. But it's very close to here to the Head of the Charles Regatta. And it takes me about 20 minutes to drive down here. Peter's BurnhamBoatSlings.com, right?
Yes.
Okay, got it. I'd like to acknowledge my website designer and manager, Laura Williams. She takes my panicked calls when the website goes kaflooey. Community Rowing is hosting us in their tent here at the Head of the Charles. Really appreciate it because it rained like crazy yesterday and we had to come in out of the outdoors. We've had some great discussions with folks, the Ukrainian men's team. We had Lane and Nick Karwoski, the Rowing Care Survivor Network, breast cancer group that sets up rowing programs for survivors and patients of breast cancer and other types of cancer. And we are going to get our theme this weekend is what's your rowing story? So I figured that would get people talking. And you want to tell us a little bit about how you got started in rowing and how you ended up with this company in a nutshell.
In a nutshell.
Yeah.
Well, the first nutshell is we're sitting directly opposite the Belmont Hill Boathouse as I look directly across the river. And I was fortunate enough to go to Belmont Hill. And I started rowing there in 1973. So 50 years ago this year as a 9th grader. And then I rowed in the summer Belmont Rowing Club and then ended up captain of the team. I went to Penn, rowed there as a heavyweight. Couldn't get it out of my system. Raced at Henley and just said I finished, lost a race by 6 inches to, I think it was the British lightweights or something, and just said I can't walk away from this sport.
Yeah.
Went on, had a nice national team career, and I was in the clothing business to start off with, and I worked in Harvard Square at the Second Urban Outfitters.
I remember that place.
And I think they're still there, and there's they're multi-billion-dollar company now, and it was a second thing. And I worked there for 7, 8, or 9, or 10 years. They were really supportive. They gave me summers off. I went to camps. I got to train around the world, all these sort of things. Back in the day, we always had a full-time job. And then as soon as my rowing career was done, I was like, oh, these guys are entrepreneurs. I can be an entrepreneur. And so sure enough, I started my own little clothing company called Rowworks Clothing. It was in 1990. And so now, 33 years later, we're still in business. It's the same original corporation. We've zigged and zagged. And we bought Burnham. We switched from clothing. We bought Burnham, which was a fledgling little company run by Harry Burnham and his wife, Kay, who were the riggers. Harry was the rigger at Craftsbury and a woodworker. Kay made covers.
What does a rigger do? Just
at Craftsbury, he fixed all the motors, he fixed all the boats, did all that. So he was like a boatman / rigger. And he was having some trouble and was going to go out of business. And Paul Mildy from Pinert,
I remember, I know Paul,
who still owns Pinert and runs it. We still make covers for him. Said Mattapoisett said, maybe you ought to talk to Harry, and you're in the sewing business. Maybe you could take over or do something for Harry. And plus, I need covers made. So, sure enough, 25 plus years later, that would have been 97 or so, or 98. We're still at it. And we've got a staff of about 10 people, and we cut and sew and make covers and all sorts of travel accessories. And we've been here at the head of the Charles since probably 1990 every day. I've raced in...
Did you race this weekend already?
I raced this weekend.
What was it?
60-year-old Masters 8 under 1980 Rowing Club that are half of my Penn ex-teammates. And we still consider ourselves teammates. Okay. And a group of our national team guys that all rowed together, and we still competed against the same cast of characters. The guys are on other boats that are of our same ilk, and we know each other. And
so it's like a big reunion.
There's an Australian boat that I've known the strokeman since the '83 Worlds, and he had a successful career, and he's still at it. And so it's a big reunion on this.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And we had a charming moment since we raced out of Belmont Hill, all of a sudden standing 50 years later, getting a picture taken at the Belmont Hill dock with a Belmont Hill oar was pretty funny from that perspective. I'm like, wow, who would have think this?
Yeah, like where do the decades go anyway?
Yeah.
It's like wild, isn't it?
I don't know. It's kind of crazy time.
So you're up there in your tent, or your vendor tent with Burnham, and who's come by?
Pretty much everybody. It's an interesting thing. So my staff is my son, Patrick, who's now 37, and Linda Murray,
the rocket scientist.
And Linda's been in the rowing world as long as I have. My wife Karen helps out, and so between basically all of us, we know everybody here.
Yes,
is what it kind of comes down to, and everybody stops by.
Do you remember names?
I remember names. I remember what people order.
Skill.
I remember often what they order, and they'll say, "You won't know this. You don't remember me." Too, and I'll say, "Oh, yes, I do. You have a boat." There's a woman named Monica Downer who is rowing in my wife Karen's Lucky Charms boat this year. And I said, and she was new to the crew this year. They needed to fill in a spot. She lives in LA. She's an ex-national team person from around 2000 or somewhere in that range. And she said, "Oh, Monica Downer." I said, "Oh, I know Monica Downer. We have a pattern named after Monica Downer. She's in our regular repertoire. So if we first made a pattern, we would call it would have been a Filippi F15 or something, and we'd name it Monica Downer, And so then there are other characters in our life that just they are right on with us, and so it's very interesting.
Just baked into the everybody's interrelated.
Yes, very much so, very much.
So your son rows?
He rowed in high school with me because I was a high school coach for 20 years. Okay. I started the Hanover High program, and
you're up in Lebanon, right?
And we're in Lebanon right now. I lived in Hanover beforehand, and my wife still runs the junior program at Upper Valley Rowing, and she was a Hanover coach, but her daughter was in Lebanon schools, and so she runs that program still, and she's a dozen years into that. So junior rowing is a huge aspect of why we're all here today.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I think what I'll maybe say our generation, because I know so many of my classmates, colleagues that are our age went back to their high schools, their hometowns, or wherever they live. They have kids, and all of a sudden, like, why don't we have a rowing program? Well, you're the only one around who knows how to do it, so you're in charge. And that's sort of how we fell into it too. Up in Hanover, there was some demand, some need. You have to beg, borrow, and steal from the college, or whatever you could do to get it going. But everybody has done that around the country in the last 25 years.
So you feel like it's expanding, it's really kind of
look at today's
on
event.
The upswing.
90 junior boys and girls fours in each event, 98.
Are these up from previous years?
I don't know if they're up, because I don't think they can max it out anymore. Like, that's the thing, it's just maxed out.
Good point.
But the demand, 30 years ago, there weren't that many juniors. If there were any junior events here in the Charles, there's an extra day now. It's unbelievable. The volume.
I like that. Where they put the old ladies and men in the morning on Friday.
On Friday, yeah.
I mean, what could be better?
I mean, the hardest thing it's just our egos. We're not the priority anymore.
I know. I don't care. I just want to get through the course.
And it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, it doesn't.
The thrill of the whole thing is that we're here with each other, and we're enjoying it. And I'm a little more philosophical than perhaps I was in the past, but it's being in this community is the best.
And how else have you seen rowing change? I mean, the diversity is expanding.
Diversity, and it's a challenging aspect, but it's happening. Like, you can feel it happening, because it isn't what it was 10 years ago.
Right.
I think the growth in women's rowing is the best thing ever, and you wouldn't have the diversity unless women were appreciated, welcomed. The NCAA for women's rowing was the best thing that ever happened, because otherwise it would just sort of say an old white men's sport, and that was it's a stereotype that we're challenged with. It still has to change. It can get better. Diversity and inclusion can be better. Adaptive rowing is the greatest thing ever to keep more athletes on the water, more people that, have limitations. And so those aspects of rowing, and I'm going to toot my wife's horn a bit, because she has a cancer recovery group.
Oh, that's right. She
runs up in the Upper Valley, and it's
is that one of the Survivor Network?
It's not part of their network. It's just her own. It's called Crew. It's cancer recovery through rowing.
Oh, great!
And it started with 3 women, and now they've got 40 people.
Wow.
And it was a free program, and she figures out how to fundraise to get ergs. Through the pandemic, she bought more ergs. It all went up to people's homes. And so suddenly there's this whole community through rowing is getting better.
Yeah.
And their lives are better. And so these sort of things, they're huge. And the other aspect is a very interesting thing, and I think the Brits do this very well. They celebrate their Olympians, and I think U.S. rowing is getting better. They celebrate their Olympians and their national team people more so. And now I see so many Brits that are basically into consulting and coaching and working with corporations about team building and all these things that we kind of took for granted because we were involved in all that. Yeah. Like we know what makes a crew go fast. We know, and now the corporate world is sort of recognizing some of these things, and it still all comes back to the rowing part of it. Yeah. So it's.
I was talking to a Chinese guy who's they had an exchange. Some entrepreneurs or business people from China came over to UK and did this team build, like we were talking about, team building thing, and then they went back and started kind of less elite sort of rowing in China, but more, so that now there's like 400 clubs or something. Right,
and that's what it takes. It's like that kind of exposure,
and it was just these kind of entrepreneurs who were like, they could see the benefit of it, and
so there's a physical benefit, there's a mental benefit, there's an organizational benefit, there's discipline in people's lives, there's enjoyment, there's social connection, like all these kind of things, and it's all just based around this
Yeah.
that we're sitting here.
I mean, look at these people. They're just
Yeah.
like millions.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
It's great.
Yeah.
Well, what else would you like to mention about Burnham or rowing, or what would you like to see happen in rowing?
Well, it's here. Let me take a quick pause. I have one moment about sort of some of those greatest things of rowing, the things that stand out in your mind, and I want to give a shout out to one is Carrie Graves.
Okay.
And Carrie was a good
She
friend of
just
mine,
recently,
and she recently passed away. But I remember being up at the Masters Nationals in Syracuse, and this has got to be 25 years ago. And Ernestine Bear, another rock star in this world, was in her single, and she could have been 90 at the time, or 88 or something. She's at the start, and she tips over. She's stuck in her boat. It's rough waves, and Carrie is in the boat sort of next to where either she's warming up or whatever happens. And Carrie jumps out of the boat, trudges, because the water's only 4 feet deep, but you don't really know that.
Yeah.
This sort of thing. And Ernie is stuck and pulls Ernie out of the boat, gets her up in her arms like this, like she's a little kid, and saves the poor woman. This sort of thing. And you see these sort of larger than life acts, that happen, and they happen around rowing.
Yeah.
And they make a difference in your life. Yeah. So it's those kind of things that I think are just really important. And now you see youth rowing, they see those things. And so that's really a cool thing.
It's a ripple effect.
Yeah. It's huge. It's huge.
Yeah.
Huge.
Well, thank you so much for coming, and I mean, you're welcome to tell more stories. I know you have.
Well, Burnham,
steady stream.
I will say one thing about Burnham that I've owned the business and I love the business. I'm an entrepreneur, but you love it's like your baby, that sort of thing. I'm glad my son works with me. We have a great staff, but it's really you have to just thank your customers. Yeah. Like we walk around here, and so I'm going to go back up to the boat trailers where all they are, and I walk around, and there's a ton of product up there.
I know.
And there's people we know. And you just go around and visit them and say hi and say thank you and thanks for using it. What can we help you with? And so, my shout out is to everybody here at the regatta. They're all customers, or future customers, this sort of thing. So and thank you for taking the time with me.
No, I always love talking to you, and it's just, you have an iconic company in the world of rowing. So. Yeah. Thanks, and best of luck for the rest of the regatta.
We'll have fun.
And we'll come up and see you.
I was going to say, come north and visit us. Ski
I'll
season won't be that far away.
Yeah, I'll put my cross-country skis in the car and come up.
Maybe we'll get some snow this winter.
I know, right? Well, thank you so much,
Peter. Well, good. Always a pleasure.
Always likewise.
A pleasure. Yeah. Thanks, Charlotte.
I hope you retain your voice.
Yes, exactly.
You got a pretty strong voice.
A little challenging going